Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you everything I know about gradients right here in Photoshop. You know how to create gradients, how to save gradients, how to import and export gradients, and all the little details, surrounding gradients, and how to get around it. So let's get started without talking too much, right? So the first thing I'm going to show you is to create a gradient in Photoshop. There's something called the gradient tool. Like in Photoshop, there are different tools. So right here we have the gradient tool, and the shortcut for it is G. So if you click on it, our gradient tool has been activated, right? So if we go to the top here, you're going to see this, right? You're going to see this. Now there's there's gradients and there's classic gradients, right? So we're going to start with the normal gradients, but I'm going to show you the difference between both of them. Right, so we'll select the normal gradient. If we go to the next, we are seeing that gradient you're seeing there is the gradient that is active, right? And why it is active is because that's the very last gradient that I used. If I click on it, it's going to open this dialog box, and this dialog box is basically showing us a bunch of presets that are already available right here in Photoshop. So these basics, you can change it from black to white, or from black to transparent, or from black to white again. If you go to blues, right, there are a bunch of different blue, right? So these are all presets that are already saved. This is pink. These are all presets that are already saved in Photoshop, right? So let's try this basic, this black to white. So with our black to white gradient selected, all you have to do is left click and drag. Can you look at that? A gradient has been created. Just that simple. So you can see that the gradient is going from white to black, right? If you look at the top, so that is wherever you click first is going to be white, and then the second point is going to be our black point. Now if I press Ctrl Z to stop it, if I start from the right hand side, can you see wherever I start from is always going to be white? Why? Because in our original gradient that we started with, it starts from white to black, right? So that's how to create a gradient. Now these anchor points, you can move them around to anywhere you want, both the black and the white. And then this diamond in the middle is basically asking you, where do you want the transition to be, right? So the best place most times is for the transition point to be in the middle, because it allows like a flawless, smooth gradient between both colors. If you push it to the edge, it becomes harsher and harsher, right? So now if you double click on any of those points, you can change the color of the gradient. You can change the color. If I double click on this white one, this white circle, I can change the color of the gradient, right? So that's a cool trick to know. Okay, so now if we go back, if you select any presets, it will automatically just change. Okay, let me go to orange. Can you see these are presets that Photoshop has already saved in there? All right, so that's the basic way that gradients work. Right now if we go here, you can see this is, if I hover my mouse around, you're going to see linear gradients, right? So what does linear gradient mean? It means a gradient is just in a straight line, like it's just in a straight line from this point to this point. If we select the second option, which is radial gradients, so you can see this time around the gradient is more like in a circle, right? So I'm actually going to double click so that it will make more sense. Okay, let's make more sense. Can you see this? Can you see that? Can you look at how the gradient is now? You can see that it's starting from the middle and it's going to the to the edges. So this is what we call a radial gradient. If we select the third option, sorry, we have to select. If we select the third option is called angle gradient, right? This is what it looks like. To be honest, you're not really going to be using this most of the time. The next one is called reflected gradient. So this is basically like, it is, normally the gradient is supposed to be from one point to the other point, but it's like it's starting from the middle and it's going to the edges. It's kind of like radial gradient, but in a linear format. And then there's the last one, which is the I think diamond gradients, right? So let me select this. Yeah, this is, I believe, the diamond gradient also. Yeah, diamond gradient, right? So these are the five different types of gradients. So usually you're going to be using either linear. Most times you'll be using either linear or radial. Right now, there's something here called reverse, right? And it's very simple, really. Now you can see it's going from red to, so let's say peach. If you click on if you remove reverse, you can see it has switched up. If you click on reverse, it will switch. So that's what reverse does, right? Then this data here, data is basically to make sure that the blending is flawless. All right, so if your data is off, sometimes you might have something called banding. That is like, instead of it just being a smooth transition, it's going to be like a bunch of lines. Okay, it also depends on, when you're setting up your your document, right? But I'll just advise you to always leave your data on, right? Then the method, there are different methods to use your gradient, but you can just leave it at the default setting. It won't really make much of a difference in my own experience, right? So that's the first way to create gradient, using your gradient tool, right? Now if you select our gradient tool again and we change it from gradient to classic gradient, right? Let's delete this initial gradient layer. What does classic gradient do? Now remember that our linear gradient is selected. If we just click and drag like this, can you see that a gradient has been created? But what is the difference? Remember that when we created a gradient with the normal gradient, not classic gradients, remember that those anchor points were still available on the screen, and that allowed us to manipulate it. It allowed us to change the direction, it allowed us to change the colors. But with classic gradient, once you've drawn it, you've drawn it. There's no going back, unless you just draw something completely new on top of it, right? You can't just, it does not give you that flexibility that the original gradient gives you, this classic gradient, right? So me personally, I don't really use classic gradient a lot, unless in certain cases where I feel that's going to be beneficial. But the settings are the same. If you select radial gradient, you now have to come and draw the radial gradient. If you select angle gradient, you have to come and draw it. If you select inverted mirror gradient, if you select diamond gradient, right? So that's how it works. It does not really have that much control as much as the other gradient, right? So I'm actually now going to, let's just go back. All right, so now the second way to use gradient is by going to your adjustment layers and selecting gradients, right? Once you do that, you can see this dialog box will pop up, right? If you click on this place where there's gradients, this gradient editor will pop up, right? And you can see this basic blues purple is the same thing that we had when we used our gradient tool, right? It's basically just a bunch of presets. Okay, just a bunch of presets. So you can now come here in this gradient editor and make the same edits, right? So these anchor points at the bottom are where you can place your colors. So this place now, you can just click on color and you can change the gradient to whatever color. You can go click on the second color, change it to whatever color. Now it's not really showing on our screen because if you click on the top one, it controls opacity. So if we increase our opacity to 100, can you see that the green is now showing? The green is now showing, right? So these anchor points at the top control the opacity of the gradient, and the anchor points at the bottom control the colors itself. Now you can actually add more colors. How do you do that? Just click at the bottom and another color will be added. You cannot, let's change that to blue. All right, so you can see that the every effect we're making is actually occurring on our canvas, right? Now on this gradient fill, you can also change it to radial, you can change it to angle, change it to reflected, and of course diamond, just like I explained earlier. And you can now change the angle of the gradient. So if we select linear, we can change whatever angle that we want. We can also increase the scale. We can increase the scale of the gradient, right? So I like to create my gradients with the adjustment layer sometimes because I feel like it has more control because of this dialog box. Unlike the, yeah, it has more control, right? And actually, even if you create it with the gradient tool, all you have to do is double click on the layer in the layer panel, and this gradient fill dialog box will actually pop up to give you all these controls, right? We can also use reverse. We can use put on our data, right? So basically everything I've explained is also here. Right now, if we click on the gradients, like I said, these are all presets, okay, and I've explained this opacity, and you can add more colors. So now the next thing I want to explain to you guys is when your gradient is selected, right? Sorry, let me create another gradient using my gradient tool, right? Now when you create using your gradient tool, what happens is that if you look at your properties panel, you also have some controls there as well, right? So you can still change the type of gradients from linear to radial and the rest of them. You can choose your presets here. You can change the angle, you can change the scale, the normal, reverse and dida as well. Then here you can add more colors, right? If you put your cursor at the bottom, you're going to see that plus sign, and when you click on it, another color can be added, and you just double click on it, and just like that you can add a new color, right? Now for opacity, it is this second one, opacity controls. How it works is you select the points, and then you come down here and you decide the opacity. Can you see? If you're looking at the screen, you see that the opacity is actually changing, right? So that's how opacity actually works. That's how opacity works. So you select the particular area that you want. You can also move opacity as well. You can move it around. You can see that as you're moving it around, it's actually affecting certain areas more than it's affecting certain areas, right? So you can play around with your opacity. I'll increase it back to 100. So I just wanted to show you that you have controls on your properties panel as well. If you double click it and you click here, you also have those other controls. So it's basically the same set of controls, but you can access it different ways. So you just to recap, you can create your gradient using the gradient tool, or you can create it using the gradient adjustment layer, and then the same controls you have with your gradient tool at the top is the same controls you have if you double click it and you get this gradient fill and then get the gradient editor, and the same controls you have in your properties layer, right? So the last thing I want to show you guys is how to save gradients, right? So like I said, everything here, these are presets created by Photoshop. But now if I scroll to the bottom, can you look at all these ones were not created by Photoshop. These ones were created by myself in different projects that I've worked on. So how did I create it? So now if you look at your screen, you're going to see we just created this gradient together, right? If you look at here, you'll see this red, this blue, and this, should I call it peach? So let's say we just created the gradient, which we just did. How do you save it? You click on this custom, this name, and you can save it to whatever you want. Let's say um gradients class, right? Once you've put the name, you click on new, and if you look here, if you look where my cursor is, you see that this gradient has now been saved, right? This gradient has now been saved as a gradient class. So whenever you come back, if you cancel everything, right, if we hide this, let's say we go back to our adjustment layer, click on gradient, click here. If we scroll down to the bottom, we can bring back that exact same gradient called gradient class. So that's how you save. Now what if you wanted to delete it? All we have to do is right click on it and click delete gradient and click OK, and we have deleted it. Then now, what if we already had a gradient that, let's say you're watching a tutorial video and the person that did the video dropped like a gradient in the description box for you to download, or let's say you find the gradient on your website and you want to bring it into Photoshop. How do we do that? For example, this free sampler wave index gradient map pack, right? I actually got it from your website and I got it into my Photoshop. So how do you do it? All you have to do is, once you've opened up your gradient editor, click on import. Alright, so before we do that, just to recap, how do you open your gradient editor? You double tap on your gradient layer and click on gradients, then click on imports, and then you go and find the gradient wherever it is in your computer, right? So for my own, you can see it here. So once you click on it, just click on load, and once you click on load, it's going to appear. Once you click on it, it's going to appear here. You can see it here, right? So that's how to import. Now let's say you create a gradient and you want to export it so that other people can have that same gradient, right? How do you do that? So you select the gradient that you've created, click on export, and then choose the place in your computer that you want to export it to, and you just save it there, right? So pretty much I believe that is everything you need to know about gradients. I've shown you how to use gradients, how to control the gradients, how to create a new gradient, how to save gradients, how to import and export gradients. And yeah, that should be it. If you have any extra questions about gradients, let me know in the comment section. I'll do well to answer them. And of course, like this video, share it to other people you think might be interested in it, and of course subscribe to this channel because more amazing content will be coming our way. Till we meet again, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.